Welcome back to this week's edition of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. This week we have Wayne Johnson, co-founder of Rockaway Records in LA. They're known not only for selling albums and also, but they also have a lot of rare vinyl, memorabilia, all sorts of stuff. Welcome to the show, Wayne. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just great, thanks.
Yeah. So, well, before we get into kind of the news that came out recently, can you tell me a little bit about how Rockaway Records got started? You started it with your brother, correct?
Yeah, my younger brother, Gary, he used to work at a regular record store in the late 70s. And he heard about this swap meet in Hollywood. Once a month, there was a record swap meet in a parking lot next to Capitol Records. It became known as a Capitol swap meet. And he bugged me for months to take him there. And finally, I said, all right, let's go to this swap meet. And it just opened our eyes. We were both music lovers, and we bought records to play, but knew nothing about record collecting. And here was this swap meet, people selling used records. In those days, a rare record was $50 or $100,
Right.
and it just opened my eyes. I had no idea people cared about used records. And
Yeah.
so basically, we started looking for old records, and the following month we were set up at that swap meet. Made $400 the first time, and I was so excited. And it just grew and grew from there. We set up there, and then we started advertising in Goldmine magazine, which really grew our business drastically worldwide. That was the Bible for record collectors. A few years later, we opened a small retail store, 700 square feet, moved about 4 times, got bigger and bigger. And now we're at the point where we're focusing more on the really high-end rare collectibles. So we're actually downsizing, but doing more high-quality collectibles.
Gotcha.
We're letting our competitors, there's like 20 stores in LA that sell used CDs and cheap vinyl. Let them do that. We're focusing on what our expertise is. And my brother and partner, Gary, he's probably the world's leading vinyl expert, collectibles and vinyl in general. He knows more about just about every type of music than anybody else I know in the world. So
Yeah.
we're focusing, and we're doing really well. We're putting our efforts into the collectibles. We've bought last year or two, we've got some amazing collections, and the great stuff is just selling really, really well. I mean, it's amazing, with everything going on in the world today, but people are spending money like crazy on collectibles. I love
Yeah.
it.
And it's even easier now, I would imagine, to sell things worldwide because of accessibility via the internet and social media and blah blah blah.
Oh, yeah, it made things easier, even though we have been selling worldwide for over 40 years. And it was just different. In the old days, we would print catalogs. And every time I printed a catalog, between printing and postage, it was like $10,000. And to
Yeah.
sell a record, you mail out a catalog, people write to make sure you have it in stock. So it takes months to sell a record.
Right.
Nowadays, in some days, we buy a record, a $10,000 record in the morning. A couple hours later, it's on our website and sold. Money's in the bank instantly. It's amazing.
Yeah. That's got to be pretty cool. I mean, that's one of the things I have to imagine is been really amazing to go from the early days where you were just probably had just a table at that swap meet to now, the stuff's pouring in all the time, and you can buy stuff easier. You probably don't have to travel as much, I would imagine.
Only for the high-end collections.
Yeah.
The really valuable collections, I'll go anywhere in the world for.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy to get good quality collectibles. Selling is the easy part of our business.
Yeah.
Selling is so easy with the good stuff. It's just getting the collections, even though I'm pretty sure we pay more than any of our competitors on the high quality stuff. People seem to think they're going to make a lot more money by going to an auction house. And occasionally they do on an item here and there. I don't know if you follow the auctions. There's like 2 or 3 big auction houses, and they advertise these outrageous prices they sell things for. And they're not false. They're accurate. But those extreme prices are like, 5 or maybe 10% of their auction results. 90%
Yeah.
of the items that people put in those auctions, they would do better cash up front for me rather than
Yeah.
waiting maybe 6 months from an auction house to get paid and make less on it.
Well, I would imagine that, I mean, this has got to be very profitable for you, because the last collection that I know about, at least, was the punk collection, which was 6 figures. I mean, I have to imagine that you know, in order to pony up that kind of money at once for a collection, that you've got to be doing pretty well for yourself in general. Is that the case?
Yeah, actually, I'll be honest with you. A few years ago, it wasn't nearly as profitable as it is now. A few
Okay.
years ago, we were focusing more on selling a lot of cheap stuff. We had a lot more employees, and now we've gone where we only have 5 employees now. Our overhead is down. We have maybe 5 or 6 customers a day because we're open by appointment only, compared to 50 or 60. But because we're selling so much high-end memorabilia and vinyl, the profits are actually way up. So we're heading in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, I saw you know, it's one of those, now it's one of those dream things just to have it. But I saw you had on your site, you had a David Bowie signed, I guess it was an album of some sort. I'm just sure you have plenty of those, but there was one for, I think it was either Earthling or Outside. I forget which I saw, but
right.
It was like, you know, it's like $1,000, and I'm like, well, that's probably on my level of, for me, it's you know, an expensive purchase because, you know, my income, but that would be something like in my range. I think that if I wanted to really, you know, splurge on something, but you've got some, like the punk collection in particular, which is the, you know, I believe the latest thing the latest big purchase you guys made is pretty intense. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story. It's about 11 years ago, a local punk collector came into the store with a tray full of 45s, maybe 100 or two punk 45s. I think he's just started from the first letter, maybe letter A and B or something like that. And we bought him. We were very happy with him. And we said, yeah, we're definitely interested in the rest of your collection. He said, I'll get back to you. My brother Gary emailed him and said, yes, we're extremely interested. Let us know when you're ready. 11 years later, he answered the email and said, I'm finally ready to sell it all. And Gary went out to his house, and it was just such an amazing collection that Gary paid considerably more than his asking price. You know, he had a certain price in mind, and we paid a lot more, and we still did real well.
Yeah, I would imagine. And you've had that collection out for sale now for a little over a month, correct?
It's been probably more like 2 or 3 months. Well, actually, about 2 or 3 months ago, we hadn't had it out for sale, but word got out that we had an amazing punk collection. And all the big collectors called, can I have a look at it? And to be honest with you, with just people coming over to look at it, we've sold tens of thousands of dollars worth of punk 45s.
That's amazing.
All the good stuff went really quick. Like at the moment, we've still got a few hundred punk 45s left. And there's some good stuff, but it's like $25 to $200 stuff. All the $1,000 to $10,000 punk records are gone.
Wow. So the one thing that caught my eye was the Sex Pistols test pressing. Can you describe what that actually is, and that did you sell that one as well?
Yeah, we did. That was, well, first of all, a test pressing is the second phase of pressing a record. When a record is recorded, the first pressing is actually a metal acetate, which, you know, they make only a few of those, you know, for the producer and the band and everybody to listen to. And then the next actual vinyl pressing is a test pressing. They make a few more of those. No definite figures, but probably 10 to 30 copies, something like that. So extremely, extremely rare. And this was an original from 1977, which I'd never seen another one. So that sold instantly.
That's cool. That's cool. What did you end up selling that for?
I think that went for about 10,000.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was the price listed, but I didn't know if maybe like I didn't know if maybe if you guys get into a situation where you're almost like not bidding, but you're like got two guys say interested in something, and the guy goes, "Well, I'll pay you this," and the other guy goes, "Well, I'll pay this." Do you ever have situations like that?
No, not really, because we're different than most businesses because we set our prices. You
Yeah.
know, 99.9% of the stuff we get in, we know what they're worth.
Right.
So we set the price, and usually, if it's a good item, it's going to sell. You know,
Yeah.
every now and then you've got some oddball type item by someone who you didn't think is collectible. Then I might put it on eBay, and sometimes we get pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we thought was junk, and it goes crazy.
Right. Yeah. I could see that. Um, what's been the biggest selling item you've ever had?
The biggest selling items we've sold are beetles. Beetles has
Yeah.
been our specialty.
Yeah.
We sell more rare beetles than anybody in the world. A few years ago, we sold a drawing done by the Beatles. It was done. Are you familiar with the Monterey Pop Festival?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, the Beatles were invited to perform there,
Hmm.
and they decided not to perform. And instead, they sent a drawing to Derek Taylor, who was organizing it.
Okay.
And it mentioned Sergeant Pepper in the drawing. It was signed by the Beatles, and it was his. It was, I guess, it was Paul's way of saying, "Sorry, we can't perform, but here's something for you." And it was actually pictured in the Monterey Pop tour program.
Oh, that's
So,
cool.
and we sold that actual thing for, well, we listed it for 200,000. I think we discounted a little bit. I think it was 175,000. We sold that
Oh,
for.
wow. Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing. Have you ever rebought things that you've bought in the past
Oh,
and
many,
sold?
many times.
Yeah.
Many times. I mean, a lot of collectors are very fickle. They they desperately want something, even though they really can't afford it. They'll buy
Right.
it, and then 6 months later, oh, I really need some money. Can you buy it
Yeah.
back? And it happens quite often. And to be
Yeah.
honest with you, we started 43 years ago, and a lot of our customers are aging. Unfortunately, some are dying as well, and most of them come back to us when they want to sell their collections. They know we pay more than anybody else will,
That's cool.
and most of our well, first of all, 95% of collectors are male. For some reason, most females are not collectors. They love music, but they don't need a collection.
Right. Right.
So most of them are males, and most of our big customers tell their wives, if something ever happens to me, call Rockaway. They know
Yeah.
that we're going to take care of them fairly. We're not like a lot of businesses. I hate to say it, but there's still a lot of record dealers that have that old school mentality: buy low, sell high. It's like we just don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, we're going to
Yeah.
pay a fair price. I mean, one time we had a kid walk into our store with leftovers from a yard sale. They had 25-cent price stickers on them, and he couldn't sell them. When we told him we were going to pay him $100 for one of them, he almost fainted on the spot. He couldn't believe
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But it was a $200 record, so we made money, and he was ecstatic.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
that's the way we do business. We've been
Yeah.
like that for our whole career.
Well, and it's interesting because you kind of were, you were still selling, regular things during the big vinyl boom. It's interesting that vinyl became such a big deal in the MP3 streaming age. What did you make of that when you saw that happening?
Well, first of all, I thought it was amazing, but I also thought it was a fad that would maybe last 5 or 6 years and then fade out. And I'm so happy to say I was totally wrong. It's
Yeah.
growing every single year. I mean, vinyl sales worldwide are just amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to believe. And it's actually kind of changed the world of collectibles.
Yeah.
In the old days, what was collectible were things that weren't made to be collectibles, like a group's first record before they became famous. Things like that become collectible. Now it's like instant collectibles with the vinyl market. They make
Yeah.
5 or 10 different colors of the same vinyl.
Right.
It's like the last Paul McCartney album. There's one pressing. They only made a few hundred of it. Already goes for $2,000.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
It's crazy. It's like I said, it's a lot different than it used to be. You
yeah.
know, I used to tell people, whenever something said rare collector's item on the label or the cover, it's going to be worthless. Now it's
Right,
not the case. It's different.
right.
People love those new instant collectibles, and I hope it keeps up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, people have definitely figured out this is one of the rare areas where people can actually make money on selling something in music. Like because nobody's buying CDs anymore. No, hardly anyone, or at least hardly anyone is, and hardly anyone's buying, downloaded, the MP3s for the most part, unless they like having stuff on their computer that's lossless, full
Exactly.
size, all that business. For the most part, everybody's gone into the bought into the streaming thing, which unfortunately for musicians is not very it's not profitable pretty much at all, which is kind of a sad thing. One question I really had: have you ever had any famous musicians come in, or famous people in general just coming in to buy things?
Oh yeah, with quite a few. I mean, one of
Yeah.
my favorite customers is Jimmy Page.
Oh
He's
wow.
Yeah, he's been in a couple of times. The Plant has been in once. Morrissey's a regular customer. Brian Wilson's been in.
Wow.
Lana Del Rey was in not too long ago,
Well, that's
and quite a
cool.
few others.
That's really cool. I mean, Page and Plan alone. I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah.
What
But
is
Plant is not really a collector. He bought a
no?
few CDs. He's not a collector, but Jimmy's a big collector. I actually met him at a record show in London,
Oh
and
wow.
yeah, it was pretty exciting. It's like I was embarrassed at first because I didn't know who he was. And he came,
Oh
he
yeah.
came, I was set up at a table at a record fair there selling rare collectibles. And I had an old Led Zeppelin concert flyer from 1969 in Pasadena. And
Okay.
this guy comes up to me and says, "Oh, can I have a look at it?" And he looked at it, handed it back to me. I kind of ignored him. I didn't know who he was. I was talking to an old friend. And he walked away. And then my friend said, "You know who that was, don't you?" I said, "No, Jimmy Page." And he walked to the next table, who happened to be a good friend of mine. He said to him, "Who's that guy next to you? He has some great stuff." So he brought him back to me and introduced him to me and everything.
That's
And it's
cool.
funny. He came around to the record show like to look at that flyer 3 times, but didn't buy it. And finally I said, "Here, Jimmy, take it." And we kind
Oh
of became,
wow. That's nice.
it was like $300 or $400 item, but I said, "Nah, it's okay, Jimmy." And we became friends after that. And after that, he did spend quite a bit of money with us.
Well, there you go. It's
Yeah.
that's the idea. Sometimes you have to kind of do something like that and it brings in a steady customer.
Oh
Um,
yeah, and it's great. He's such a wonderful person. The last time he came to our store, he spent like 2 hours here. He was like a kid in a candy store. He just
yeah.
went crazy. It was great. It's just so
Yeah.
nice to deal with people. One of the most famous musicians in the world, and he was so down to earth and just a wonderful person to deal with.
What is he generally looking for when he comes in? Is he looking for old blues records or
He
what?
does like the old blues, but he also collects Led Zeppelin stuff. He does.
Really?
Oh yeah. Because in the old days he didn't keep much, so now he's trying to
No.
acquire everything. So he loves
Cool.
vinyl in general. He loves old blues, but he collects all kinds of stuff. I remember the last time he was here, he bought a bunch of stuff. Then on the way out, he saw an Elvis Presley drinking glass from 1950. Said, "Oh, I gotta have that." He went crazy over that. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
all kinds
Well,
of music.
hey, that's cool. I think that's I don't know why I'm like completely fascinated by Jimmy Page just walking around a record store buying merchandise. It sounds awesome. But your thing about not recognizing him, I've done plenty of interviews with people like in person, and sometimes when you're up front close with somebody that's famous, sometimes they don't actually look like the person you see, say on your TV or
Right.
photos or it's sometimes a different. Like some people are able to shrink from that somehow. Other people, you're like, oh yeah, that's who that is.
Exactly.
There's no there's they have some people carry themselves differently. Some people carry themselves with an aura that is just big, and then other people kind of just shrink down a bit in stature, just so they could kind of just live their life, pretty easily, I guess.
Yeah, exactly right.
What's so you said the Beatles were kind of your biggest profit. What was your favorite thing to buy?
Well, I'm a huge Brian Wilson Beach Boys fan.
Okay.
So one thing we sold a couple of years ago was the actual surfboard that was owned by Dennis Wilson, who used to surf with it, and it's pictured on the first Beach Boys album, Surfing Safari. Very famous surfboard. And it was actually pictured on the third album as well, several picture sleeves, just very iconic item.
Yeah.
And so that was, for me, the most exciting thing.
That's actually a cool one. That's a really cool one.
Yeah, that was, we sold that for $75,000.
Wow, I don't know why that seems low for some reason.
It does. I'll be honest with you. In my opinion, the Beach Boys, or Brian especially, is so underrated. Yeah. I mean, they influenced so many musicians. People don't realize that if it wasn't for Brian, there wouldn't have been a Sgt. Pepper album.
Right.
Paul McCartney heard Pet Sounds and said, "Oh my God, what are we going to do now?"
Yeah. Well, there was that back and forth, honestly. At first, it was kind of like there was like a little bit of a weird rivalry in terms of a friendly rival between them and the Stones, and then there was, like you said, with Pet Sounds, and then Peppers and all that. There was that back and forth there for a minute. It's always interesting to read about musicians being like charged by some other musician, and then trying to beat them at their own game while respecting what they did at the same time. So that story was always fascinating to me, the whole thing with the Beach Boys and the Beatles.
Oh yeah, they always influence each other. I mean, what made Brian do Pet Sounds was Rubber Soul. He was blown away by Rubber Soul, and big Beatle fan right from the beginning. And Paul and Brian are actually good friends. Paul's a huge Brian fan, and I actually saw Paul McCartney at a Brian Wilson concert. He was sitting right behind me.
Oh wow! Yeah, Brian for a while lived out this way near Chicago for a while, in St. Charles, I believe.
That's correct. Yeah,
I don't remember if that was with the Dr. Landy thing or what, but
no, that was a little later. That was with Joe Thomas, who produced some of his records. Lived out there. That's it,
Joe Thomas. Because Brian and Joe were on a local radio station here a lot, the Steve Dahl Show. That's how I knew that Brian. It was crazy that Brian was living out here in Illinois when he could live in beautiful Los Angeles. I'm like, I don't know why anybody. I never understand why people move from like Hawaii or LA to come here, but
I agree.
Well, to be honest, the LA 90-95% sunshine would probably make me go bonkers after a while, quite frankly, having grown up here.
Right. Yeah.
You were born in California, correct?
Nope, actually born in New Jersey.
Oh wow. So what got you to move out there?
Actually, my whole family moved from New Jersey to Australia in 1967.
Oh wow.
And
was your dad like in the army or something?
No, not really. I think my parents just wanted to get us away from New Jersey. We were kind of getting into trouble and things like that. So they said, time for change.
That's about as far away from New Jersey you can get.
Exactly. So the family moved to New Jersey, and then in 1974, I decided time to see my own country. So I moved back here by myself and did it like a 6,000-mile trip around the country by myself, and then actually didn't make it to California. Ran out of money before I got to California. But then I was living in Wisconsin with my brother for a couple of years, and was almost ready to move back to Australia. But the last minute, I got a call from an in-law in California. It was 30 degrees in Wisconsin. He said, "It's 90 degrees here. We're going to the beach. You should come out and visit."
Yeah.
So I canceled my trip to Australia and said I'm going to visit California first, and fell in love with it.
You were you were in your 20s, I gather, at that
Yeah,
point.
exactly.
Yeah,
I
that's
started going in my
an
20s.
easier move to make when you're in your 20s.
Oh yeah, no, I fell in love with California. It was everything I imagined from listening to the Beach Boys sing about it, and
Oh yeah, yeah. There's something about that era. I guess the whole '60s era of California. I've been watching a lot of mystery science theater movies, and I was on a run of beach movies, and I was like, boy, California was really kind of cool back then. I mean, I'm sure it's cool now, but there was something about California in the '60s that really on screen looks pretty awesome.
oh yeah, I would have loved to grown up here in the '60s, but
Yeah.
didn't get here till '76.
So what is there anything else going on now? Is there any collection you're looking to put out there soon, or have you gotten any more news on
Well,
anything?
Gary's still working on the Beatles vinyl. He's still got thousands of Beatle records to price, and that's after getting rid of the low end stuff. We actually bought about 20,000 Beatle records.
Wow.
And we actually wholesaled about 18,000 of them because they were low end that we didn't want to deal with. But the 2,000 that Gary's working on could be, $100 to $10,000 records.
Yeah. So what are they? First releases? Are they just impeccable covers, or
just all over the place? I mean, yeah. If you're talking about original '60s Beatle albums on Capitol, they've got to be pretty much like new to be valuable.
Yeah.
If you got a used copy of Meet the Beatles from 1964 in average condition, it's worth $10.
Yeah.
Mint condition, 300 or 400, still sealed, 3,000 or 4,000.
Right.
So if they're just common records, they've got to be mint. But on the other hand, there's like rare promos and things. Beatle records from U.S. Beatle records from 1963. Who in this country heard of the Beatles, let alone bought their records in 1963?
Right.
So those records, even in bad condition, are like the Please Please Me 45, VJ 498. In bad condition, it's $500.
Yeah.
So, but that was, nobody bought it. I never heard of the Beatles till January of '64.
That would make sense. Yeah, that would track. What about the British versions of Beatles albums? Are those even harder to come by?
Yeah, it's harder to find clean copies. We do come across a decent amount of mint copies '60s US records because, the pressings were much bigger than UK, and they gave out a lot more promos. And we deal a lot with industry people. So people that work for Capitol, Warner Brothers, and a lot of times they get all these records for free and don't even open them or play them. So we do find a lot of mint records, but finding near mint UK pressings from the '60s, almost impossible. It's like you take even, big selling common records like, we'll say the Zombies, a US near mint copy of Odyssey and Oracles, maybe $100. You get a mint copy UK, it's going to be $1,000.
Yeah.
Huge difference because it's just so hard to find clean ones. And people love the British pressings now. Years ago, I think 10, 15 years ago, everybody would say Japanese pressings are the best. I want Japanese pressings. Now people say they like the UK pressings better. And it's like they also, with Beatles, they want country of origin. So UK pressing vinyl in the last 10, 15 years has probably gone up 5 or 10 times. Japanese pressings might even gone down a little bit.
Yeah. What about the Stones albums? Because there was always that big difference between, say, track listing from the US and the UK because of how the albums came out at different times. Are the UK versions of the Stones albums much more sought after and more expensive?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because most of the US pressings are actually pretty common. It's not that hard to find clean Stones albums. But again, UK ones are impossible, especially finding first pressing mono Stones albums. Very big money on those.
Yeah. I've got a number. I mean, I don't have a number. I have a number of albums, meaning I have more than one. But I don't have like a whole collection. But one I bought at a record store in Chicago was one I think my parents had. But it's even both versions. The one I bought and they had were bootlegs, honestly, because they hadn't come up. It was the Metamorphosis album. I think that's a bootleg. It's with them with their faces revealing like insects.
Okay.
Yeah, you know that one?
I'm not familiar with that one now.
Really? Okay. Yeah, I don't know how rare that is anymore, but I have a copy of that I'd be interested to see what people are looking at, because it's not an official release. Like I said, it's a bootleg.
Well, there is a market for bootlegs. Yeah. I mean, especially the early bootlegs. I don't know if you remember the old trademark quality colored vinyl bootlegs from the 70s. No, some of those.
I mean, I'm in my 50s, so I do have a sense of time. I do have a sense of time with regards to all this stuff, but I don't, as far as specifics. Like, I've never been a huge collector. I buy a lot of things, but I'm not a collector. You know what I mean?
You're just a music lover.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, I'm not a collector either. You know, I love music, but I don't need to collect it. Actually, I look at the store as my collection. It just changes every day. Yeah, but I don't have any personal.
You see things come in and you say, "Oh, wow, that's here," and then like, "Oh, now money's here."
Exactly, and it changes all the time. It's exciting. I mean, I still, feel I'm so lucky to be doing what I'm doing. It's not like work. I mean,
it's a cool gig, man. I really think you found. I mean, God, for somebody to find a career in what they love is pretty amazing.
I'm blessed to have this job.
Yeah, and you get to work with your brother still. How's that relationship been over the years?
Pretty good. I mean, we've had our disputes and disagreements and that, but I think right now it's going really, really well.
That's going to happen with family.
Oh yeah.
It's the point where it's like I need to get away from you for a while.
Right.
I spent too much time with you as a kid. I don't want to spend all my time with you as an adult. But what would you say that Brian Wilson's Dennis Wilson's Surfboard is the one maybe that you kind of like the most? Was that something that you would kind of wish you had kept?
Not really. Just too much trouble keeping it. So big and storing it. And that's why I don't need to collect.
Yeah. You got like you said, you got the store.
Exactly. We had it on display in our store and got great.
You got photographs of it.
Exactly.
It's fascinating to me that you're a guy that sells collectibles and you're not as much a collector, because some people are. Some people sell collectibles and they're collectors themselves.
Most dealers are actually collectors, to be honest with you.
That's probably better for you.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you. When we first started the business 40 odd years ago, I was starting to collect all the rare Beach Boys stuff. It was exciting. I was seeing stuff I'd never seen before. And I said, I want this. And then I said to myself, do I want to be a collector or do I want to start a business? So I said, I'm going to stop collecting, and maybe later on when the business builds up and I can afford it, then I'll start collecting again. But now it's like, I've had the pleasure of getting to know Brian pretty well. It's like, to me, the material stuff doesn't mean that much to me.
No, I get that.
I love the music more than ever, though.
Yeah. Well, it's like I've met some famous people, and I hardly ever even ask to have their photo taken with them, because I figure, like, for me, I've only asked one person to really sign anything, and it ended up being for other people. So, but I figure my experience of getting this time with that person is so much cooler than just having a photograph. I have that memory.
Exactly.
Which is a lot cooler, I think.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's like the experience of, when I was second time I met Jimmy, he was telling me, well, he bought a record. You wouldn't remember it, but it's called Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio. Very famous 50s.
Yeah, no, I don't know that one, but I
Yeah.
I'm surprised actually. I've never heard of them, but
Classic rock and roll album from the 50s. And Jimmy actually bought one for me for $3,000, an American copy. That was the
nice.
first really expensive thing he bought. And then he told me a little story. I said, you know why I'm buying this? When I was 12 years old, I bought the original copy of it in England. And listening to that taught me how to play guitar. You know, that's how he learned to
Wow,
play guitar, by listening to the Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio album.
it's really cool.
Yeah, so you can't beat experience like that. See,
No,
material stuff doesn't come close.
you got to reconnect him with what started him on his path. That's
Exactly.
really awesome. God, that's I almost got chills thinking of it. That's really something.
I'll never forget it.
Well, Gary, not Gary, Wayne. I called you by your brother's name. I don't know your brother, but Wayne, is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to touch on? Do you want to mention this? I mean, I'll include links, but if you want to mention the site, and anything that in particular.
Well, rockaway.com is our website where, new stuff is added almost daily. So if you see something you want, jump on it and don't regret it.
Yeah.
But like I said, we've got new stuff coming in all the time, but I always need more. And right now, I'll be honest with you, we've got a lot of great vinyl collections coming in, but we're getting low on posters and memorabilia, which is what I handle. Gary handles the vinyl, but I'm actually almost getting desperate for a great poster or memorabilia collection. And right now, the market's as strong as I ever see it. So we'll pay big money on the right stuff.
All right. So if you have posters and memorabilia, contact Rockaway. And the name comes from where?
Actually, Gary was a big Ramones fan. So it comes from the Ramones song Rockaway Beach.
Yeah. I was thinking that, but the fact that you guys grew up in New Jersey didn't make me assume that it was Rockaway Beach. But there you go, Ramones.
Yeah, we actually used to go to Rockaway Beach when we were kids, but Gary was too young to remember that. I remember it, but Gary was a baby back then, so he didn't remember that, but he loved the Ramones, and we got it for the Ramones song.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a perfect name for a record store too. Just ties in and everything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Wayne, I really appreciate you taking the time. This was a really cool talk. I loved hearing your stories. I wish you the best of luck, going forward, and hopefully I'll be able to stop into your site and buy something one day.
All right. Or if you're in LA, come by and visit us.
If I'm in LA, I will definitely make an appointment to come in.
All righty.
All right. Thank you very much, Wayne. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having me. You too.
All right. Bye.